Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the SDG Action Zone. Today is an absolutely packed session, a packed day. Day number 3, opening the UN to the rest of the world and the world to the rest of the UN, bringing people in. We're starting this morning with Beyond Sport. We're going then to voluntary local reviews, where cities are coming to give a declaration on how they're going to accelerate the action for SDGs at a subnational level, which is really, really, really critical. As everyone knows, lots of people living in cities. You move that, you move the needle. Really, really great. We have a panel of women parliamentarians. Women rule the world. Certainly should. We are all products of women, which is an amazing thing. We are going then from UN Digest, amazing lightning talks. Google is coming in to do a artificial intelligence session with their partners, Project Everyone. We have a huge announcement coming in from World Economic Forum and some leading tech companies around what they're doing for oceans. Expo 2020 announcing some of their winners. Myself, actually, talking about the SDG activation that we did in and around New York and online digitally. We then cap off the day with a decade of action announcement, where the next 10 years are going. Super, super exciting. That's basically the example of how this all ladders up into what comes next. And capping off the day with women trailblazers in business. Today's a pretty big deal in terms of it being someone or something's birthday. I don't know if everyone knows, today's the 4th anniversary of the signing and the adoption of the SDGs. They turn 4 today. So we will be sending our birthday wishes and possibly singing happy birthday a little bit later. You don't want to hear me do that. But we will do it collectively. So far, 4 People, 4 Planet has reached over 30 million people since we went live. And it's had over 50 million impressions. So that's hashtag 4 People, 4 Planet. And the solutions and insights coming out of the SDG Action Zone have reached over 10 million people with over 40 million views, and thousands of people are watching this from home. So those of you not in the room, thank you for joining us. Those of you in the room, thank you for joining us. We hope to be able to scale this up. Without further ado, I'm going to ask our moderator, Nick Keller, to step up from Beyond Sports. He's the CEO and founder and has a super, super exciting and exhilarating panel joining him. So over to you, Nick. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a fantastic session. Welcome to those across the world watching on UN Web TV. I have the complete delight of hosting a session around sport and how the sport industry should be able to help and support achieve the UN SDGs and contribute to sustainable development. So it's great to be talking about solutions and not challenges. When we created Beyond Sport over a decade ago now, it was on a simple notion that sport can have a positive impact on people, on communities and society as a whole. And when we reflect on that 10 years and see where the world is at the moment, it certainly feels that when you look for something to cut through the complexity and some of the polarization, when you think about the impact of social media and the opportunities around young people, this really feels like it's going to be sport's decade. And at the heart of that will be some cross-sector collaboration that will really help us achieve sustainable development, and really where sport can show its wares across all the SDGs, or certainly some of them. Beyond Sport as an organization has spent its time inspiring, convening, offering insight, and trying to find impact across the entire industry. We bring together the private sector, the teams, the leagues, the federations that have so much power in communities and across the world around the world's global hobby. It offers great opportunity to do that. And when we convene people, we look for insight and best practice from across the world and look to share it with each other. And then hopefully we draw forward and create some fantastic impact. We really gather that impact through our Beyond Sport Awards, where we reach out to 140 countries across the world and find some of those best-in-class organizations that are really delivering staggering social change, whether it be fighting gang crime in Chicago using basketball, whether it be using rugby to disseminate gang violence, or reduce teenage pregnancy even in Madagascar, to a real variety of projects. In New York itself, we've got a fantastic basketball project that helps young people into education. It's a real diverse group of projects from across the world that we celebrate. We also bring together unusual collaborations, particularly of note while we're here. We pull together the US professional leagues, the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, MLB, and WNBA, putting them all together to see how they can facilitate change in their communities. One of the other things that we've been doing is having high-level leadership discussions around action, bringing that multi-sector together to see how they can face specific challenges. And we call this 10 roundtables, and we hosted one 2 weeks ago. We had Beyond Sport House happening at SAP at their Next Gen on their 48th floor. We had a 3-day event, and one of those events was called 10 Roundtables. And this is our leadership platform, 10 tables, 10 challenges, 10 people on each table. And we look to facilitate change and action across those groups. On each of those tables would have been cross-sector, which is so important as we look to solve some of these pressing issues. We were asked this year, each of the tables were attributed a particular SDG, and we were asked to offer some recommendations to this audience and to the zone here from the industry, and what we felt was the crucial part that sport can play in delivering and helping deliver and hit those targets that the UN have set us. The first thing, and this is really important, and having spent over 20 years working in sport and the last 11 committed to the sustainability space, we have to establish sports credibility across the UN cluster. It's been a fight over the last 10 years to gain that recognition. For so much time, it's been considered that sport should sit under child protection and child safeguarding. And it needs a more distinct recognition along the cluster, more integration across some of the solutions that can be offered. Obviously, a UN resolution would be nice. Probably the most practical way we can make that happen is by forging partnerships with UN partnerships who are hosting us and UN Global Compact. And particularly Beyond Sport is going to take that forward as an action point, because we feel they're parts of the UN that really connect with what sport can do and how it can offer a private sector a really comfortable way of getting involved in the SDGs. The next one, and there are only 4, so bear with me, is for the industry to work closer together, and particularly around communication. How can we engage youth in the SDGs and sustainability? Obviously a really big and important area. How can we recognize the leadership role that sport can play? Sport offers a megaphone onto society. It gives us an opportunity, an insight in who we can be as a society rather than who we are. We have to take that opportunity and grab it. We have to encourage athletes to speak up. They are the role models, and as we watch hierarchies shift and change in society at the moment, the importance of athletes can be seen to everyone, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Huge amounts of investment is made into large-scale events. At the moment, the Rugby World Cup is taking place in Japan. We have the Olympics coming up in Tokyo. Some huge events taking place. And it's with those events and those investments, we really feel these mega events need to take a template of the SDGs to represent their legacy. What is their true impact? It can't be just the winning of medals. It has to be far greater. Sport's greater calling has to be represented on these huge stages with these very powerful organizations representing the very best that sport can do. The third point is we have to map the current work. We connect to around 2,700 organizations in the world that are doing phenomenal work in their communities. A very diverse range of sports and social issues are being challenged. How can we map that best practice and share it? How can we make that an open source so we can really deliver the SDGs? And one of the ideas that I think we're going to be looking to take forward is a sustainability scorecard. How is sport doing across each of the different areas that the UN have identified across the 17 SDGs? So there's some real potential there for things to happen and collaboration to happen. And the final point is really important because sport has a really unique place in communities. It is invariable that the stadium or the arena tends to be positioned in poorer areas where land is cheap. How can those stadiums, those huge buildings, sometimes the biggest buildings in a city or a community, how can they start becoming centers of community? How can they really be built to integrate? How can they affect change? How can they become the homes that they should become? Not just to fans, but to the community as well. And then we bring that down to a micro level when we're talking about communities itself. That sports field, that pitch, sits really at the heart of communities where people gather and unify. Sometimes people that really don't get on with each other come together through sport. And so the important piece of safe spaces is something we really feel we need to explore when we're looking at recommendations to how we will work in the future and deliver the SDGs. So those were the 4, I think, pretty insightful points that our 10 roundtables, our 100 leaders that got together. You can see they're all quite clever. So we're hugely grateful for the work they did and, of course, for SAP hosting us there. I'm going to come back to a definitive action that Beyond Sport will be taking off those 10 roundtables and how we're going to take what we learned forward. But to bring some of that to life at the moment, I've got a fantastic panel. It's cross-sector, it's fascinating, it has experience in it, it has some old friends in it and some new parts of our family that we're delighted to welcome. Before I introduce the panel, we are going to be hearing from Ovi Muheli, former NFL player and now eco-activist a little later. So if you are watching from home, stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting 40-50 minutes we've got ahead of us. So I'm going to welcome my panel. We've got half an hour with them. So hopefully we'll offer some insight on where the real action lies within sport. Please can you welcome on stage Kwame King, youth leader at NYCFC. Elisa Chaseman, founder and CEO of Unite 2030. Kevin Martinez, Vice President of Corporate Citizenship at ESPN. Ana Arizabati, CEO of the Fundación Selección Colombia. And Ashley Huffman, PhD, Global Director of Gender Equality at Athletes for Hope. What an awesome panel. Just take a mic. You've realized how useless I am, and they can do this on their own now. And he's breaking the stage as well. This is, I think our social media numbers have just gone up quite substantially.
That was a start.
Okay, welcome all of you. How are you doing? How are you enjoying UN Week? Everyone okay?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
I just broke the clock, so.
Yeah. You haven't broken UN Week,
no, I didn't break it.
Okay, come on. Welcome anyway to all of you. Kevin, I'm going to start with you. ESPN, one of the biggest global sports brands in the world. You're part of the very fabric of sport, really, in many ways. How do you find sport playing a unique role in sustainable change, and how is ESPN supporting that? And what sort of, at the end of it, what sort of impact are you looking for?
So, you know, as part of the Walt Disney Company and the growth of the Walt Disney Company, you know, we could not have a better parent company in purpose and corporate responsibility. So that's helping us realign and retool ourselves as the media sector in sports and to try to accomplish purposeful, meaningful corporate responsibility. So our group is called Citizenship, specifically because you know, corporate responsibilities, you know, is the governance, and citizenship is what you do with that governance. And so for us, it's a very proactive approach. We've taken, 5 years ago, we made a decision to really look at what can the sports sector do and what, as a media company, which is its own unique scenario along within the sports sector, do to be a catalyst for change. And so we created a new strategy called Use the Power of Sport to Inspire Social Change. And we knew that we could convene, much like Beyond Sport, but taking your lead and getting people together and thought leaders that you bring to the table. But what we've been able to do is to establish also a real credible access to sport strategy to first start to reach into the first step, which is that if you're going to use the power of sport for social change, you must be in the sports space. And so we knew that there was a large inequity in the sports space in the United States and across the world. And so that was our first step. And, we know that it's not the first aha moment, but we knew that we didn't catalyze it. The leagues were working on specific programs. We had great NGOs in the country and across the world, but we weren't collectively working with them. So we had all shared value, but we weren't kind of doing shared outcomes. So that was our first step. The second step is that we created a strategy that also said, let's look at this that's going to be 10 years down the pipeline. So yes, access is going to be important. And so we've done some amazing investments across the country and across the globe that have allowed access for the most vulnerable populations, for some of our collaborative efforts with whether they're outfitters like Nike or Adidas, or we're working with other organizations, even some of our competitors. We created something called the empowerment sport piece, which is where we're going to move to, which is aligned with the SDGs, which is how do you empower people and how do you give them the collective action that they need using sport as the catalyst for change. And so we have just now started that venture. The first 5 years, we have been able to increase, we have a fairly rigid and structured grant process. We're corporate giving, we're not a foundation as well, so it's much tied to the business, which is a very important piece here. 30 years of experience in corporate responsibility tells me that we've got to lift our company as we lift our community. And so we have been able to create new access to sport for youth to about 1.6 million young people over the last 4 years. We had hoped to do 1 million, and so we're way past that. We're going to set new goals. But the other piece is that we've targeted into some very specific areas, particularly under the SDGs. One is equity. So we've looked at the right of entry for people with intellectual disabilities, which we think is one of the most vulnerable populations. And hopefully you all know Special Olympics and the amazing work that they have done. They went through a reimagining of themselves about 6 years ago. I met with Tim Shriver. There was this little thing on the board over here called Unified Sports, and I said, what's that? And it's literally putting people together that have the sports in common, who have intellectual disabilities and don't have intellectual disabilities, and you play together. And the component of that is this exponential lift in the universe, which is you're going to teach the worst basketball player in the world when I'm with my teammate how to play basketball. And I've never been a good basketball player, but I will play basketball. And I've learned a lot. So this Unified Sports, we've been able to double the amount of people with intellectual disabilities across the globe. We're making investments all over 5 continents to be able to make sure there's access. So that's an example.
Yeah, and you've done a remarkable job. And what we can see is obviously when they're engaged in that community, the chances of integration into society, into employment, and back into education is so crucial. Thank you for the work you guys are doing. Amazing. Anna, you've been working in Colombia now for over a decade. And your vision is to create a more peaceful society there. How's sport facing up to some of the immense challenges there, and how have you seen that change?
So it's been 15 years that I've been rolling around the sports for development area, and I've been in different roles within organizations and different places of the sector. And I often say this in meetings with a lot of conviction. I think organizations in Colombia working in sports for development have found all the solutions for our challenges as a country, because there's so much experience in working for gender equality, peace promotion, youth empowerment. So if you look at SDGs and our challenges as a country, organizations have been working there for decades as well and finding solutions. There's 2 challenges that I would like to mention that were like the most amazing experiences of this. One is accessing like impossible places to access, because they're still in conflict, and everyone said, even like development agencies and organizations working there forever, like, you won't be able to access this place. And the ball below the arm, and we're just here for a game. This is what we do, and the only way that we were able to access these places and to start talking about peace promotion with children and trying to keep them away of these lives was with sport. And the other example is bringing together victims of the conflict and the mobilized population. There's a lot of programs from the government in both areas and agencies, so they work for victims or they work for the mobilized population. But we said, like, these organizations have been working in sports for peace building for decades, so let's bring the two groups together. Everyone said, like, that's crazy, that's not gonna be possible, and we just did it through sport. So I do believe, and I say it with a lot of certainty, that in Colombia we've found many solutions to our problems, and that we really just need to be able to scale up this knowledge and this experience and take it everywhere in the country, of course, but also, of course, share this knowledge with hopefully other countries in conflict and post-conflict, which is the crazy case of Colombia that we're facing both at the same time. So again, I just believe that sports for good organizations in the country have found all the solutions.
Fantastic. And we're going to have a discussion about scaling up later, I think, if we've got time at the end. I think it's a really, while we're on this platform, I think it's probably the most significant thing. Because as we know, that sport can have an impact a really tight impact in small communities, but how do we take that really positive, direct impact and expand it out? So that's kind of quite important. And Kwame, you are running a program yourself in New York. You're a young leader. You're quite clumsy. But I didn't have that in here, by the way. But,
no, it's understandable.
So when we look at that community impact and from Colombia all the way to New York, how important is it for you to engage, for NYCFC to engage young people? How does the brand help you do that? And how does it help you specifically run those community projects?
Well, first of all, not to be clumsy, but honestly, New York City Football Club and City in the Community actually helps and engages kids through different programs like Saturday Night Lights, which is a Manhattan DA's opportunity to help kids get out off the streets on different times. And also, just like Soccer Block. Soccer Block is a free summer program for kids in the communities where kids don't know how to play soccer, but it's also to actually let them learn how to get out their communities. Some kids do not get out their communities. It's crazy to think about that. Like, a lot of these kids don't come out like Brooklyn or Manhattan. And so it's certain things like that where we actually engage with the kids. But also, like, it helps our community out so much, because when we are in the community, these kids never heard of the game of soccer at all. And when we come in the community, it's just like a breath of like a new era of sport. Like, they just know about football, basketball, where it's just like, oh, soccer is a different type of sport, where it's not about the game. It's more like, it's really, I'm sorry, sometimes I get so like involved into it, but soccer is just not a game. It's more of, it goes off to different communities, different cultures. It's a different language. You just need a ball to have a game of soccer. You don't have to have the same dialect or anything like that. It's just really just a sport where you can come together as a group of individuals and just have fun together.
And how did you get involved? What's your journey to? I mean, you're now sitting here.
Yeah, I mean, it's
in the UN. Tell us a little snapshot on how that happened.
Yeah, so I was a volunteer at first. I started playing soccer when I was 17, so that's really late in the soccer world. In the football world, let's say football. Football is the correct term. But yeah, so I started as a volunteer, and I was like, you know what, I see the impact with kids. I started with working with kids. I knew my passion was kids since I was in the 5th grade. And so yeah, so volunteer, and then I was just like, you know what, let me just start working with you guys part-time. Started doing part-time work with them. And I started a part of the YLC, which is the Youth Leadership Council, where there's 16 to 24-year-olds talking about different things that's happening in their communities and how can we combat it using soccer. And then I just started, was like, you know what, let me just start working full-time. They gave me a full-time position, kind of, where I'm doing lead work with youth leadership, which is a whole bracket within itself. And going to the Global Youth Summit, which is a part of City Football Foundation, where different communities from different parts of the world come together in Manchester and stay at the CFA with Manchester City. And we talk about different things that's happening in their communities. So that's what's really happening with myself. But I'm just really blessed to be here. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, thank you for all that you do in the community as well.
Appreciate
it. So we're hearing it for Kwame, and obviously we've had pretty remarkable moments here this week with Greta, and you know, we've seen schools kind of boycotting going on and marches going on. Youth are becoming a bit more vocal in these conversations. How do you see sport in your work? And you can explain a little bit about that. How do you see sport playing a greater role in reaching out to young people?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to provide a little bit of context, I do not come from a sporting background, so I'm the least qualified person to speak on this panel. But I do work with, I run a platform called Unite 2030, and we work to empower young leaders from literally all over the world to help them develop solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I kind of fell into the sporting world by accident. I won a competition in partnership with another organization from Chelsea Football Club to run one of our programs focusing on eliminating discrimination in sport. And I was kind of like, I don't know anything about this, so like, let's just see how it goes, and we'll try it out. And we had over 2,000 people apply for a 100-person program, which was just absolutely incredible and really eye-opening for me in terms of, you know, reading through these applications, seeing the incredible work that young people are doing to achieve the SDGs through sport, but even more so, the desire to want to achieve the SDGs through sport. And that is really the main challenge of our generation, of the young people that I'm working with, is there's so many young people in the world who care about making an impact, but have no idea even where to start. And what we do is we work with them to help them use whatever they're passionate about, whether that's art or music or sport or business or whatever it is, and help them channel it to do good. And so it was really eye-opening for me to say, whoa, there's something here. There's 2,000 people at least that even heard about our program to apply for it, to say, I want to do something that works to eliminate discrimination in sport. And we really narrowed it down to, you know, like racial and gender discrimination and economic discrimination for the most part. So we really, really narrowed that topic down. And so it's really about how do we channel that energy from young people, and how do we help them do good with that? And what we need to do is bring older voices who have power and influence to the table to help support young people. And you know, I always think like I'm just a representative of the community that I've built, and I shouldn't be the one sitting up there. There are 4,000 young people in my community who should be the ones up here speaking on behalf of our community, but I just happen to be, you know, the voice because I founded it. But there are so many incredible young people who are doing like the coolest things in the world. One of our young people, for example, that we work really closely with, Tejas, he lives in India, and he runs an organization where he goes into the slums of India and helps empower young people through soccer and teaching them, you know, basic leadership skills. And it's just absolutely incredible to watch him transform people's lives, and we're trying to figure out how do we help navigate elevating those voices when they seem really far away and really distant from us and don't necessarily have access to incredible organizations like Beyond Sport. So it's just providing those young people with a channel where they can get access to the resources and the influence that they need to make a difference through sport. But I'm like absolutely blown away every day at the incredible work that our young people have done. And since we've done this program with Chelsea Football Club, it's just been like a spiral of seeing the incredible things that are being done through sport. And, you know, it's just, we as a collective, us here on this panel and in the audience and in the world, can do so much more to help uplift.
Well, it's lovely to hear someone from outside sport talking about that amplification that you get from sport. And I'm, of course, what a great route for young people to get behind the SDGs, so much more comfortable for them. So actually, one of the great things about our industry is that we hold this precious commodity, which is the athletes themselves, that connect to young people in such a unique way and such a powerful way. You've been working in this space for an awful long time around gender equality and other areas. Just give us a snapshot of the role that these athletes play and why they're so crucial when we talk about engaging young people in the SDGs.
Yeah, so Nick, you said an awful long time, which made me feel a little old there. I appreciate it. I think it's just wisdom at this point. So yes, I think athletes have an incredible role to play in the social change movement. And you have to look no further than just this last week, Megan Rapinoe's speech at the FIFA awards, where she received the best footballer in the world, and how she talked about athletes have a platform, they have a voice, they have a stage in which to talk about homophobia and racism and gender inequalities. And so I think gone are the days of just shut up and dribble, right? I think present are the days of athletes as ambassadors, as activists. And you know, I would even argue that those days have always been present, and even the founder of Athletes for Hope, Muhammad Ali, he's one of the prime examples that I can think of in terms of being willing to stand for what you believe in and those convictions guiding you to the point of maybe imprisonment. And even throughout history, the female athletes who have been so critical in the movement, I think of Billie Jean King and the Battle of the Sexes movie that was so popular, and just her stance in understanding, you know, the patriarchal ideas of women inferiority and harassment, and then Title IX and how it's really been spurred forward, I think, by the sport movement and creating equal access to education, and even Allie Raceman and the incredible USA gymnastics team, and how they've combated predatory behavior and sexual assault facing Larry Nassar, and now the conversation around the U.S. women's national team and pay equality. I think none of those issues are relegated just to sport, harassment or sexual assault or pay inequality, but because of critical athlete influencers, those are now part of our everyday vernacular and part of our conversations that we're having with our kids because of incredible athletes who are willing to stand up for those issues. And so I think the voice of the athlete has never been so accessible, and the things that the places and the spaces where diplomats can't reach to talk about sustainable development goals, athletes are there. They're in the news feeds of our social media channels for young and old, men and women, and everyone in between. And so I think if we're going to actually achieve the sustainable development goals, it's going to take all of us. And how do we reach all of us? We engage all of us, and athletes being a big part of that.
I think that's very beautiful, eloquently put. Kevin, a big part of that is storytelling, and your organization sits at the heart of telling sports story. How important is it that we tell the stories that you're hearing about on this platform and that you've come across along your journey in the last 5 years, and how are we best to tell them so they have impact?
So it's incredibly important. Okay, first of all, as I said earlier, part of our job at corporate citizenship at ESPN is to help build the business. And we have impact that comes out of great investments and alignments and working with Beyond Sport and others, but you want outcome, right? You want to be able to tell the story. And the story is where we exist. And so for years and years, it was kind of ninja, kind of behind the scenes, and then we became kind of commandos about it. We were really trying to establish that we could go in there and go in with force and say there are great stories to be told about kids with or athletes with intellectual disabilities, and really put it out there. So, you know, it may have been at 39,000 feet or 49th floor of a building, but it was there, right? But now we're down in the front lines, and we're saying there are relationships that exist that really establish the connectivity to the sports fan, because we're about the sports fan, that humanize it and create collective action. I see myself there. As an example, today, or last weekend, I know it's going to sound silly for a lot of people, but we showed a young man at college game day who was holding a sign who said, "Hey, send me money for free beer," right? And he ended up getting $2,000, $3,000, and then it kept coming in, it kept coming in, it kept coming in. Well, he happened to be at the Iowa State game where they do something called the Iowa Wave to the Children's Hospital behind them, and Disney and ESPN do a lot of stuff with children's hospitals. And so there was kind of this cultural piece, but what we did as a storyline is we took it farther and we had conversations. We reached out to our sponsors. They've now matched pieces of it. He now has raised over $1 million for children's hospitals. Right? So that's a storyline that, okay, it's not our storyline. It's a storyline that exists in a sports fan. He is part of something that is a collective good. He is a good citizen of the universe using sport as that catalyst, and we just happen to be the place. We should be telling that story. More of those things will happen.
That's a great example. And Anna, when we reflect, you talked about spaces and safe spaces, which was one of our recommendations. How can we do more to develop a safe, accessible spaces, and what should they mean within communities?
So scaling up. So I was thinking of what has happened since we met.
Yeah.
So when we started this Football for Development project in Ciudad Bolívar, almost 20 years ago, it sounded to us like a very crazy thing to use football, soccer, as a way to activate this community. It was like, are we crazy? Does this really make sense? And probably Beyond Sport was the first platform where we get to learn that there's other crazy people with the same crazy idea that sports is helping catalyze something. But I think that we've matured very quickly in this last 10 years, and we've gotten to a place, like I'm going to talk about the case of Colombia, where organizations have not only found how great job they're doing, but they understood that they need to work together and collaborate to be able to solve the issues that we have, because no individual organization is going to be able to do it alone. And now in the place where I'm sitting, we're trying to articulate the whole ecosystem. So where's the private sector? Where's the government? Where's the cooperation? And how do we build a common goal, a common agenda about the solutions that we're bringing to the table, and how to really make that a solution. And I think what we are missing here is that I feel that sports continue to be like the second thing that you'll think about. So if I want to do education, I'll do education first, and you are not thinking of sport as the first solution. You're thinking of it as a complementary thing. So I'll answer the question saying we need to push this first thing in the agenda. Sport is bringing a lot of solutions to the table, and we continue to be like a little accessory thing.
Wonderful. Now, look, we're running out of time, and I said that we'd ensure that we all commit to something around the SDGs, and while we're in the action zone, I think it's important time. I'm going to kick off quickly, if that's all right, on behalf of Beyond Sport. So we have a global foundation, and for this year's commitment, we have chosen to focus on a collective impact project that we started this year, where we select 6 to 8 organizations from different sectors that will then go and work together across a 12-month period. And during that time, that they will seek a solution together that they couldn't do on their own. And so we've committed $600,000 from our foundation to sit with SDG 13, climate action, and SDG 10, reducing inequalities, to give you a snapshot of who's involved in those. And I'll see if I can get all these right. We have AEG One Earth, I Am Water from South Africa, Protect Our Water from the US, Manta Sailing from Vietnam, World Sailing, the governing body, and the YSO from Rwanda. You can get a sense of the mix. They're going to be working together for the year. They have $300,000 to come up with something that will push the SDG forward as a group. Our commitment, and I'd like to thank Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation and the Swedish Postcode Lottery and ESPN and Comic Relief to making that happen. But our commitment is to hopefully get 8 collective impact groups going for next year. And then we'll keep building until we've got the industry engaged in this amazing, amazing way of driving things forward. Actual change happening. I'm going to hand on to you.
So we recently launched our 30 by 30 campaign, which comes with our 30 by 30 pledge, which is our promise to empower 30,000 young people to solve the Sustainable Development Goals by the year 2030. So we're on our way, but what we need to do to get there is engage more partnerships, and what we are continuing to do is engage more strategic partners. But I don't want to talk about engaging strategic partners anymore. I want to do it. So that involves us doing it, partners coming to the table and being willing to have hard conversations about how we can bring youth and involve youth and have youth at the forefront of sustainable development instead of in the background or, sitting at the kids' table over on the side. We give them the mic sometimes and giving them an occasional platform. We need to have seats at the table for young people, and we pledge to continue to provide spaces for young people to have a seat at the table.
Wonderful. Kevin.
Well, I've got 3 quick ones. The first one is that the Walt Disney Company has just put into their overall strategy access to sport for youth, which is the first time that's ever happened. They've done health and nutrition around sport, the magic of healthy living, but by adding access, it allows us to use the full force of the Walt Disney Company, including Marvel and Fox acquisitions and others, to really try to promote that piece. And so through that, in March of 2020, the Walt Disney Company will make a major announcement in the LA region talking about how to create multi-sport engagement through an academic center that's going to be built there. And so I will just kind of drop that as an opportunity. The third is that we are, ESPN has announced $1 million grant, portfolio of grants to help the most vulnerable receive access to empower youth through sport. So we'll be looking at specific elements in foster care. We'll be looking at youth violence and how to foster opportunities for kids who are dealing with gang violence, Native American reservations. But first and foremost, we just announced the first, which is we'll make a $100,000 grant to Safe Sport to make sure that no matter what, kids in the U.S. and using those same principles, and all of our grant organizations, by the way, must take Safe Sport training, but to make sure that when we make those grants, there's a safe place for kids.
Brilliant. Just say to follow, you don't have to make multi-million-pound commitments as you go through. They can be.
We are lucky.
It doesn't have to get bigger and bigger.
Or even $1 million.
I'm worried about you at the end. Yeah. Anna.
So I'll probably catch up from before and say continue pushing to build like a joint agenda and strategy. And one thing that we're working on in Colombia to be able to make this happen is how do we improve the ways to learn from each other. And you were mentioning this as one of the points from the roundtables. One of our issues as a sector is that we are creating solutions every day, and new organizations continue to start to create those solutions, and we are not learning enough from each other. I think there's enough knowledge already in place, and we have to be better at sharing both best practices and lessons learned, and saying, okay, this is where my mistakes were, and don't do them again, and accelerate knowledge. Because, I mean, we have to feel this sense of urgency. We need to really move this forward.
Okay, excellent. Ashley.
Okay, short and sweet. So at Athletes for Hope, we're very committed to equipping and empowering athletes to engage in the causes that they care most about. So we will continue to commit to that and to help athletes find the intersections of their passion and platform to activate around purpose. So thank you.
Wonderful. Kwame?
I'm going to make a personal goal of just doing good health and well-being. I think it's important to eat healthy and live healthy and be what you eat. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make that personal goal for myself.
Wonderful. What a lovely panel. We've covered a lot in 32 minutes. Absolutely brilliant, by the way. I just want to wrap up on a couple of things. Anna talked about that sport is offering a myriad, all solutions in Colombia around sport for development, which is really wonderful for someone who's been working in 15 years there to be still talking about sport for development and its achievements there. Kwame talked very emotionally about the simple language that a ball offers, which was very moving indeed. I loved your comment about generations, and I definitely see that our generation, the people of influence, our job is offer pathways, because we do have a generation that are desperate to see change happen, and it's up to us to lead them there, actually, and we have to put more effort into linking our generation into the younger generation, I think, is a vital piece of work, so I appreciate what you do there. As you talked about the complete power of the, I mean, it was a lovely, I'd like to capture your 3-minute segment, actually, because all of it is quotable, and it was beautifully expressed about what we're doing here. So, and finally, and I think probably the most significant point that was made by Kevin, is Disney has now put the word sport into their action. And as we sit in the UN, where the word sport doesn't appear really anywhere at the moment, I think we as a panel have expressed how important we are. If you really want to commit to delivering the SDGs, and we do want to hit those targets, that we, our industry, the people in it, the NGOs, the private sector, the teams, leagues, federations, everyone in our sector can lend ourselves to that. And we offer a huge opportunity for the UN cluster, from the World for Sustainability, to affect real change. Thank you to the panel. You've been absolutely fantastic. Please, thank you, guys. We're going to do a quick changeover here. Thank you, guys. That was really lovely panel. We got a quick changeover before we welcome on our special guest. We're going to lose some chairs. Although he's a big guy, I think we should leave 2 on for him and one for me. So we heard some really fascinating stories there. We heard about the importance and the power of an athlete to affect change. And we're now going to hear, I'm going to move these over here a little bit so we've got a bit of, there we go. So I'm about to have a fascinating 15 minutes. Ovi Muhali is a remarkable man, NFL player, played 5 years for the Atlanta Falcons, about 10 years in the NFL. But what he's gone on to do, and he was a Pro Bowler, which for those that don't know is one of the top players around at his time. But what I've discovered and what I found, that his passion for his foundation and his real desire to inspire as an eco-athlete and affect change around the climate space is something refreshing in the world of sport, and particularly in the world of NFL. So please, can you give a huge welcome to Ovi, please? A hug is like going to the chiropractor. How you doing?
Doing good, doing real good.
So from gridiron to the UN, how does that happen?
Wow. Yeah, I was not, didn't have the UN on my life pathway goal when I was playing the NFL. It was more of just, how do I block Ray Lewis? How do I keep, Matt Ryan upright? How do I make sure that my tailbacks are not mad at me because I'm missing blocks? So I was just really blessed to be a kid who got to play a game and have that be his career. I think there are hundreds of thousands of kids right now playing high school football who dream about getting to the highest level, and I got there. And then I got to be the top of the highest level, going to the Pro Bowl and playing with some of my heroes. So I never thought that the UN would be a possibility until I understood that it's bigger than me. Because when you get so focused on just yourself as an athlete, you kind of have to make sure that your body's right, make sure you're eating right, make sure everything that you're doing is correct. But when you realize that the world's much bigger than you, and kids are the best way to realize the world's much bigger than you. I have 3 of them, Olivia, Nasia, and Obasi, love them dearly. My last 2 kids came into this world fighting for their lives. They came severely premature. They had to go through several surgeries, several issues. I was still in the NFL at the time and going from practice to the NICU, to practice to NICU, talking to my wife, talking to doctors, and just trying to do what I could to help them. And I made a lot of money and did pretty well, and so I was able to give them the best on that end. But when they finally got out of the NICU or going to get out of the NICU, they had to deal with the environment. The air quality was so bad in Atlanta at that time. For me, it was fine, but for the kids, we had to literally hide them from the world. And as a father whose main job is to take care of his children, I couldn't. And it was because I was ignorant, I ignored, I completely didn't understand that the environment was something that affected me. I figured somebody else would deal with it, somebody else would take care of it, and that's just not the case. So I went on a journey to educate myself and to understand what I could do to help with environmental justice, with the climate crisis, with global warming. It's such a huge, crazy, scary issue, but I wanted to do something. And I realized that, getting involved in the movement and using sports as a way to really engage people could be a way I can do some great stuff. So eventually got to the UN.
And it's funny, really, because you talk about that moment, and it involves nothing more valuable in the world than your children.
Yeah.
And I suppose when we look at climate and the scale of the issue, it's sometimes difficult to personalize it, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's such a big issue that sometimes you feel like, you know what, is it really going to make a difference if I change a couple of things? Is it really going to make a difference if I recycle or don't use a straw? I mean, no one's looking. No one's watching. I can do me and I'll be fine because somebody else can take care of this. I'm sure Paul Hawken or Al Gore or Richard Branson or one of these, great environmentalists will deal with it. What do I have to do to add to it? And I realize that there's a lot that people can do.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because did you feel what stage in your career was all this? Where were you?
It was near
the end or
like midway through my career. So I had the wonderful, it happened in stages. I had the chance to meet the great people at Captain Planet and had a chance to meet Ted Turner and Laura Turner Seidel and some people who inspired me with a comic book and a cartoon. But it was really my kids that made this happen. That was near probably 3/4 end of my career.
And did you feel a sense of obligation around it? Did you feel athletes have a sense of obligation to use their kind of profile, as we heard from Ashley? Do you feel that from Athletes for Hope? Do you feel that's an important part of your makeup? And
absolutely. Athletes feel like, because most athletes come from situations where they wanted to do more, they just felt like they couldn't. And they want to go back to their neighborhoods, go back to those who they can give not just a hand out, but a hand up and make a difference. With great power comes great responsibility. I think it's a Spider-Man quote, but I always love to go back to that because we have so many people looking up to us. We have so many people who hope that we get to the top so that we can make a difference. So when we get there, we want to use our words, our voices, our reach to really make a change for better.
And it's funny because it's almost like an awkward space to find an NFL player in a way, isn't it? And does that help you? I think, does it kind of, what are you doing in the climate space? Or, this is where the kind of a slightly different crowd hang around it in this space.
True, it does help me. I think either one of the first or the first NFL player with an environmental foundation in history, because I looked and I'm searching to partner with other NFL players, but I want to make sure I show people that this is a worthy cause, and sports has been used in so many different ways, just as you said, and over at Beyond Sports, you guys have a litany of great resources and great individuals that are using sports for good, but it hasn't been used to its full potential. It hasn't even been used to a fraction of what it can be used to its full potential for the environment. And I always talk about athletes. We need clean air to play our sport. We need clean water to play our sport. Like, we should be the ones who are first in line. And as natural-born leaders, who I think we are, we should be the ones saying, hey, we got to maintain sports as, just a game for future generations, and taking care of our environment will do that.
And what are our next steps? What's your insight that's bringing you to this space? You've obviously got that inspiration that came from your children, and what's your journey taking you on at the moment?
Well, my journey took me on, starting my foundation and using sports to promote sustainability, and we're really excited. Myself and my lovely wife, Masika, we've taken the issue with our kids and said our foundation is going to try to educate and inspire the next generation of environmental leaders, because there are so many kids who don't know that this is the issue, and we've really understood that communities of color, and especially kids of color, aren't being invited to this environmental movement. I love all people, but when I go to these climate conferences, when I go to these events, these workshops, I just see white people. And I'm literally a token, or there's a handful of people. It's not right. I think part of the reason that's happening is because we're not framing the conversation. We're not really connecting. We're not making sure we meet people where they are. And I think sports can do that. Rich, poor, black, white, Republican, Democrat, everyone loves sports, so let's use that as a catalyst. One of the things that I'm really excited about is I joined with Comics Uniting Nations to try and get the SDGs out. Life on Land, climate change, all these great SDGs can be told through stories and through comics. So we came out with one of the first black environmental superheroes, if not the first, Gridiron Green, which is a comic book about SDG 15, and we're excited to put out our next comic book with Recycling Partnership about recycling. So it's going to be coming out in November around World America Recycles Day, and it's just going to get that kid who doesn't think that this is his issue, get that kid who doesn't think that this is, for him, but is dealing with asthma, is dealing with, pollution around them, dealing with poor air quality, dealing with lead in his waters, and wants to do something more, but doesn't know how. We have comic, we have curriculum, we have gamification, and we have a lot of great stuff.
So how do we get the cut through when people are challenged by so many issues on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
And whether it be food poverty, whether it be just basic safety, finding shelter, health, how do we get it across that this, we were talking earlier and we said, you can't achieve the SDGs if you're only talking to 25, 30% of the people.
Exactly.
So how do we get that? And I think the way you're approaching it is wonderful, actually, because we've got to get, you're catching the imagination, we're using sport, we're using entertainment at the same time. How do we really get that attention when so many people are dealing with so many problems?
You have to answer the most important question to people, which is, what's in it for me? Why should I care? You got to pass the so what test. Because, I go to kids and I talk to them on the regular. I go into some of these neighborhoods that some green organizations don't want to go into. I go and see some of the neighborhoods where they do have gangs, where, kids are getting pregnant at 13, 14, where they'll laugh somebody out. Like some of our leaders right now, they'll laugh them out the classroom and say, what are you doing here? Like, we're not caring about butterflies or caring about, the Amazon or rainforest. Like, I got real issues right now. But if you tell them what's in it for me, if you use sports and just, I think, relate to them on the why they should care, they'll care. And for me, it's make green by going green. Save green by going green. Help with the health of yourself and your loved ones. Those are some of the basic needs that people refer to, and I think the environmental movement has that for them. With green jobs, the green economy, the next Elon Musk, the next great inventor, the next person who can find trash turned to treasure, they're in one of these Title I schools, in these underserviced areas, in these neighborhoods where they're not being really spoken to in the right way. And I think by getting more people of color, by getting more communities of color, but by getting the whole environmental movement to realize that we've got to change the way we do things. I started this movement in 2009. I started my journey in 2009, and the movement was very white. In 2019, it's still very white. And if we do the same thing in 2030, it's going to be very white. And that's a problem because communities of color will be everywhere. The workforce will be mostly kids of color. These kids want to be spoken to. They want to be heard. And if we don't use sports as a way to do so, we better find something else because we're not going to win at this movement. Companies, corporations, the UN, we're not going to achieve any of our sustainable development goals if we don't involve communities of color and are intentional about doing it.
Okay, I had other questions, so we're going to finish on that.
Sorry.
That's just absolutely fantastic. Yeah, a round of applause, please. Just an amazing insight that you offer us there, and I think you're going to be going on a journey yourself over the next few years. But on behalf of all of us, I rarely sit down with an athlete that speaks so passionately and so definitively about a subject and offers such a rare piece of insight. The athletes are normally following other people's insight. You don't. And I think as you go about your journey in the future, I think you should feel that you should be inspired knowing that you're doing something pretty unique here. And we hope we can all support you on that journey. But thank you very much, Ovi.
Thank you. About supporting, my wife will get mad at me, and she's winking at me hard. The way to support our kind of call to action is that we want to get 20,000 of our comics out by the end of 2020. And through Recycling Partnership, our partner for the next comic, and by going to our website, omfgreen.org, we want people to join in our comic book challenge because you can't fix a problem if you don't know there is a problem. And by getting this message out and wrap it up in a way where there's excitement, there's fun, there's engagement, and there's education at the same time, we feel like we can really make a difference.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you, Ovi. Just brilliant.
Thank you.
Chatting with you. So, you can stay there. That's an hour. Who would believe it? Such entertainment and insight and inspiration from a really good, wonderful group of people. We're only about 30 seconds over time. I think that's probably pretty remarkable as well. So as we gather here, and two of the main areas that I get from the SDGs is the job here is to engage youth into the discussion and to engage the private sector. And I want to just speak on behalf of sport quickly while I'm here. There is no better way to reach out to young people than sport as a platform. And there is no better way of engaging business in SDGs and sustainable development than encouraging them to get involved in sport, because we can solve their business issues as well as the social issues at the same time. So on behalf of all of us that have been up here on stage, thank you for this platform. To you at home, I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and good luck, everyone. Have a fantastic day ahead, and thank you.
I'm so sorry. I went all over the place. I apologize.